Hi, I'm Certified Personal Property Appraiser Dave Maloney, author of Appraising Personal Property Principles and Methodology. This video is another in a series of hot tips for the personal property appraiser. To see all my videos, visit my YouTube channel at youtube.com/asktheappraiser. Note that throughout these tips, I make reference to USPAP. USPAP is an acronym for the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, which are promulgated by the Appraisal Foundation of Washington, D.C. The goal of USPAP, which is updated biennially, is to maintain public trust in the appraisal profession. For more about USPAP, visit appraisalfoundation.org. One of the steps in the appraisal process is a requirement that the appraiser define and then perform the assignment's scope of work. USPAP defines scope of work as the extent to which the subject property is inspected and identified, and the type and extent of data researched and analysis applied in order to produce credible assignment results. A specific requirement of USPAP is that the report contains sufficient information to allow intended users to understand the scope of work actually performed. But how should this disclosure be done? In a separate scope of work section, or should it be spread throughout the report? USPAP doesn't say. What USPAP does say in its advisory opinion number 28 is that there is no requirement that the scope of work be contained in a separate section of the report. It can be if the appraiser so chooses, or it can be described in various sections throughout the report. Or a description of all the work performed can be in both a separate section as well as in other locations. Scope of work normally applies to the entire assignment, so is usually considered to be appraisal-specific information. Therefore, a description of scope of work would typically appear in the transmittal letter. But assume I retained an expert to authenticate item number 4 so that I could properly value it. This element of my scope of work would more appropriately appear in the valuation section of my report along with item number 4's description and value, since I'd consider the authentication of item number 4 to be item-specific information. Regardless, if you use a separate scope of work statement, be sure that it is not merely boilerplate, that is, unedited text. Be sure to customize your scope of work for each assignment so that the client will be aware of all the work you did in order to reach your conclusions. It can take a lot of thought and careful narrative to explain how the scope of work was sufficient to produce credible assignment results. This is best done by clearly explaining in your scope of work disclosure how the requirements of USPAP's Standard 7 were properly considered and satisfied. For several hundred pages crammed with hot tips for the personal property appraiser, get a copy of my book, Appraising Personal Property Principles and Methodology, at appraisalcourseassociates.com.